Welcome back, conference, and I'm sorry for that slight inconvenience. I would now like to welcome Eileen Donnelly to the rostrum.
Conference, my name is Eileen Donnelly, and it's an honour to be with you here in Glasgow today. Like thousands of other Scots, I have always wanted to vote for a party that would put the needs of people first. A party of honesty, integrity and of optimism. For years, I didn't know which way to turn as the SNP and the Tories dominated our politics. But now, the Scottish Labour Party, under Anna Sarwar's leadership, has shown me that there's a party out there that will stand up for the people of Scotland. The need for that change could not be clearer. When my mum needed care the most, we were faced with an NHS and social care system on its knees, in hospital for 5 months, longer than necessary, awaiting a care package. Then, after much escalation to managers, she did have brilliant, devoted carers. However, they were overworked, underpaid and disrespected through shocking working conditions. When Mum could no longer be at home, we had to sell the family home to get appropriate quality care. Something very important. Since my experience with Mum, I often think, who cares for the carers? Conference, I've asked myself so many times, who cares for the carers, paid and unpaid, in our country? We need change to deliver an NHS that will ensure people like Mum are supported until the end, not left behind. And for that to happen, we need to see a UK Labour government after the general election, led by Keir Starmer. Only the Labour Party, under Keir Starmer's leadership, will put money back in people's pockets, back into working people's pockets, save our NHS, reform public services and put integrity back at the heart of government. This year, we can make that happen with a general election. Conference, we are now going to watch a short video.
We've changed, and because we've changed, we are now the party of change here in Scotland. Rutherglen, you did it!
It's not just division that means two governments fight with each other and fail Scotland, but instead cooperate, work together and deliver for Scotland.
With a stronger Scotland in a better Britain.
That's what we get with the Labour government.
So without further ado, it is my honour to introduce you to the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, conference. Thank you, conference. Thank you for that very warm welcome. And you're having a fantastic conference, And thank you, Eileen. And I think, speaking on behalf of everyone here, I'm sure, my heart goes out to you for what you and your family went through. Because, believe you me, I know what that feels like. So thank you for sharing your story today. It is fantastic that you've got your husband Stephen here with you today and your daughter Grace, aged 10. And Eileen's delivery of that speech was brilliant because Grace has been taking her through the motions for the last couple of days and tutoring her on how to deliver a good speech. So Grace is now going to mark me out of 10 when I finish speaking this morning. Grace and Stephen, you're very welcome here. Now, conference, Eileen and I actually first met in Rutherglen and Hamilton, the place where our party was reborn, in the same Valley of Clyde where our story began all those years ago. So I want to start by thanking each and every one of you here today who campaigned in that by-election. What a lift you all gave to our party back in the autumn. Now, we're having to get used to by-election wins, of course, but that one was special. And after all the struggles that you've endured over the past decade or more, the hard yards that went into that victory, the years when your commitment and patriotism towards this nation were questioned just for supporting our party, you should enjoy this moment. Now, not too much. We can't get carried away, can't stop fighting for every vote, not even for a second. But nonetheless, take pride in your efforts that have put us back on our way in Scotland. Enjoy the feeling that a tide has turned, that the wind has changed. The Labour Party has returned decisively back to the service of Scotland's working people. And conference, I want to thank Michael Shanks, of course, a fantastic candidate in that election. He's now providing some company for Ian Murray, who is doing a great job representing Scotland's interests in Westminster. And I am proud to know so many other candidates here in the room today who are ready to join them and to serve this nation with pride and dignity. And conference, finally, I would also like to thank Anas and Jackie for their outstanding leadership of this party. Conference, Anas was with you right through those darker days for Scottish Labour, but his conviction that Labour would become the choice for change in Scotland again, that never wavered. Anas, the whole party across all four nations draws great strength from your belief, and you should know that we stand full square behind you in your mission to turn it into Scotland's reality. Thank you, Anas. And conference, before I begin, I have just returned from the Munich Security Conference, where every conversation I had came back to the situation in Israel and Gaza, and the question of what we can do practically to deliver what we all want to see: a return of all the hostages taken on October the 7th, an end to the killing of innocent Palestinians, a huge scaling up of humanitarian relief, and an end to the fighting. Not just for now. An end to the fighting, not just now, not just for a pause, but permanently. A ceasefire that lasts. Conference, that is what must happen now. The fighting must stop now. Thank you. Our conference. Any ceasefire cannot be one-sided. It must stop all acts of violence on both sides, and it must lead to a genuine peace process, because the offensive threatened on Rafah, a place where 1.5 million people are now cramped together in unimaginable conditions, with nowhere else for them to go. This cannot become a new theatre of war. That offensive cannot happen. And even in these most terrible of circumstances, the two-state solution must be back on the table. A safe and secure Israel, where the horror that Hamas inflicted on October the 7th, the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, could never happen again. And alongside that, a viable Palestinian state, a state which is not in the gift of any neighbour, but is an inalienable right of the Palestinian people and is recognised by this party and the world. That is what we must hope for now, conference. And there is always power in hope. Hope is the fuel of change, the oxygen of a better future. And that is what we must offer Scotland. Because after 14 years of Tory failure in Westminster, 17 years of SNP failure in Holyrood, only Labour can provide the change that Scotland needs. I mean, look around this nation. Drug deaths off the scale, schools going backwards, buses that cost a fortune, those ferries still not serving the island communities who need them. And as Eileen mentioned, a terrible crisis in our NHS. Ambulances queuing outside A&E, patients who need treatment waiting inside. Conference, what does the First Minister say to people like Eileen? What does he say to the Scots who think, I'm paying more and more and more, and getting less and less and less from his government? He says, let's send a message to Westminster. Send a message with all the problems this nation faces. That is the level of his ambition for Scotland. Send a message. Conference, I'm afraid this is the story of the SNP now. They're not interested in fixing Scotland's problems. They want to exploit them. The mask has slipped. The pretense that they were ever interested in improving the lives of working people, rather than using their problems as fuel for their grand cause. That has been exposed. Scotland should send more than a message to Westminster. It should send a government. That is our ambition. Because, Conference, you can't tell me that this is good enough for Scotland. You can't tell me that this nation of ideas, creativity, resilience, the nation of the Enlightenment, the nation that gave rise to our movement, that stood beside working people, defeated fascism, built as part of our union a welfare state out of the rubble of the war. You can't tell me Scotland does not deserve better, because it does, and we will deliver it. A new Scotland, a new Britain, bound together again by an old partnership, the solidarity of working people across 4 nations, driving our country forward with a Labour Party dedicated to its service. And that is what the SNP will never understand about our movement. The solidarity of working people is our identity and our argument. The force, perhaps the only force, that can unite these 4 nations and drive us towards a better future. So when they say Labour doesn't need Scotland, we say, with one voice, Labour isn't Labour without Scotland. Britain isn't Britain without Scotland. This isn't about gaming an election for us. This is about who we are, who we stand for, who we fight for, who we serve. And our answer, without distinction or fear, from Nottingham to Neath, Dumbarton to Dundee, is the working people of this country. They are our cause. And Conference, as I've explained before, it is a cause that is personal for me, because I grew up working class in the 1970s. And while I don't plead poverty, I know what a cost of living crisis feels like. I know what it feels like to be embarrassed to invite your friends around because the carpet is threadbare. There's a hole in the window. The phone's been cut off because your family can't keep up with the payments. The cloud of anxiety that hangs over a house, the what next fear, the postman coming down the path will bring another bill we can't afford. I remember that. But I also remember what it's like to look around your community, look at other people like you making their way in the world, and to think, if I work hard, if I apply myself, if I get a break or two, I have a chance in this country. We took that for granted, didn't we? Even as things got tough, even as inflation spiraled, there was a sense of security, a comfort even, that hard work and imagination would be rewarded. Britain would get moving again. Things would get better for families like ours. Now, my parents always believed that. And I believe it's what people want more than anything for their family now. A story we still tell our children, work hard and you can achieve anything. Work hard and you get a fair chance in Britain. The question is, do we still believe it? Do we still believe that working people will get a fair crack of the whip in Britain today? I don't even need to answer that, do I? Not in this nation. And that's a tragedy for us who believe in Britain. Because if, like me, you believe that delivering on working class aspiration is our core purpose, if, like me, you believe fighting the idea background equals destiny is our main battle, and if, like me, you want to build a Britain where you don't have to change who you are just to get on, and yet you still can't answer that question, then it cannot be any surprise that this fraying of a British promise, this absence of security we used to take for granted, led to working people across Scotland turning their back on Britain. Conference, that is why Tory stagnation is a threat to Britain itself. The recession announced on Thursday, that isn't just a line on a graph. It's confirmation that the idea which holds this country together is on life support. You know, even now, I don't think they realise how much their economic war on stability, their ignorance about working class aspiration, their lack of a plan for growth in every community, they don't see that this is a direct threat to Britain. That is why we've made growth for working people our central mission for this country. Why every fight I've had has been about reconnecting our party to our job description. A project to drag us away from the game of gesture politics and return us once more to the politics of service. That's why I've always said we have to win in Scotland, have to win in the Red Wall in England, have to win in working class communities in the valleys in Wales as well. This project has a purpose. We changed the Labour Party for a reason, to unite working people behind that old partnership, that we serve working people as they drive our country forward. Now, it is an approach to politics that has been forgotten, dismissed as old-fashioned. People say, speaking about class or working people, that isn't a strong enough identity anymore. Not when you have to compete with a party that claims that they and only they can be a vehicle for Scottish national pride. Others say it's not edgy enough. They say modern politics is a battle for cliques. Division, not unity, is the order of the day. That's what grabs the attention. But how can you talk about changing inequality, structuralism, racism, structural injustice in this country without an account of class? How can you unite a country as diverse and complicated as Britain without appeal to the solidarity our arguments contain? No, every country, especially one as old as ours with so many stories to tell, and our story, the Labour story, is one that connects with our times. Because I believe people are tired of division. They're tired of a politics that demands a constant focus on enemies, rather than the ideas and aspirations that bring us together. And frankly, when your public services are on their knees, when your mortgage is going through the roof, when you have to choose between feeding your kids and putting the heating on, that has to be our priority. And that's not just about turning down the temperature either. I believe people want unity in their politics. I believe people want a sense we can come together, that our four nations can pull in the same direction for a common good. That's what I mean by national renewal. It's not just a plan to get us back on our feet. It's the rediscovery of a political muscle that we used to flex, and that, whether it's tackling climate change, dealing with artificial intelligence, or standing up to the aggression of tyrants like Putin, we need to flex again. It's a kind of partnership, a bond of respect between people and politics that is essential for dragging Britain out of the hole the Tories have dug, but which, and this really is the radical part, I believe we can deliver. I mean, go back to the pandemic, or, to be honest, the whole of the 14 years of Tory rule. Because if you can look beyond the chaos and crisis of Westminster, there is another story. Working people never let each other down, did they? Whenever they were asked to dig deep by politicians, whether in Westminster or Holyrood, they did, didn't they? It's why we clapped for our carers, why we clapped for our nurses, stood by all the people who were indispensable to keeping Scotland and Britain going in that crisis. Our teachers and teaching assistants, our childcare workers, warehouse workers, delivery drivers, retailers, energy workers, the armed forces. And conference, what did we do? We stayed at home, gave up our freedom, missed our families, missed weddings, missed births, and even in some tragic cases, missed last goodbyes. So look, I know how broken politics in Westminster is. I'm not blind. I came to politics late, having run a large organisation dedicated to public service. I honestly can't believe some of the things that pass for normal in that place. But however cynical you are about the failures there, or for that matter, the failures in Holyrood, politics is still the only path towards a better future. The hospital your children were born in, the home you live in, the wage in your pocket, the opportunities in your town, the sense of pride or unease you feel when you walk down your street, that's all politics. And as the pandemic shows, or at least the example of working people in the pandemic shows, if there is respect, if there is a plan, if there is a cause, and four nations backing the pride and potential of working people is a cause, then yes, I believe we can unite our country. Yes, we can reach beyond our communities and nations for that common good, turn the page on division and decline, and walk towards national renewal together. I mean, let me put it in this way. Wherever you are in Scotland, Wick, Fife, Motherwell, Rutherglen, Aberdeen, Leith, Glasgow here today, the value of politics is written into the walls of every community in this nation. You can see it in the Scotland that the solidarity of working people built, that the labour movement built, the industrial spirit, the sense of community, the social housing, the NHS, the welfare state, all emerging out of the trauma of national sacrifice, all delivering security for working people in defiance of a volatile world. But it is also there in the scars of the Scotland born of 1979 onwards, when the Labour Party was turfed out of power, in part, it has to be said, by the SNP, and the Tories got to manage a period of enormous upheaval instead. A Scotland where too much of the prosperity oil and gas could have brought was squandered, where the government saw working class security not as a source of hope and dynamism, but as a threat, and where the economic transition away from central Scotland's main industries was, as it was across Britain, chaotic, unstable, and needlessly cruel. Conference, what I'm saying is this. We live in a time of upheaval every bit as big as those two defining periods of modern Scottish history. Revolutions in energy, science, technology that are changing our children's future beyond recognition, overturning the established relationships of power all around the world. And with that, creating new threats to democracy, an age of insecurity, with fault lines that run right through the living standards of working people. So make no mistake, in this era, the difficult decisions will come thick and fast, and the consequences might stay with us for decades. The job we must take on is to build a bridge to the future between the jobs we must protect today, good jobs in communities right across Scotland, and the opportunities we need to win now for a better tomorrow. Security for decades. Climate change is the perfect example. It's a transition we will have to make, where at every stage we must maintain the consent of working people. Show we understand that the economic stability they need in their lives, that is non-negotiable. That is why we took a tough decision last week on our green investment plans, an acknowledgement of the damage the Tories have done to our public finances, but also that it's not good enough to say we'll do something popular if that stability can't be delivered alongside it. That's not serving working people. In fact, it's precisely the sort of politics that got Britain into this mess in the first place. Nonetheless, on all of the things that matter, on energy security, cheaper bills, the jobs this nation needs to retain its status as a pioneer of energy innovation, then mark my words, we will move Britain forward. This is a race we can and we must win. I went to Aberdeen recently and met the workers who maintain the pipelines. 100 miles long, stretching all the way back to the oil and gas fields. They're proud of what they've built in the cold waters of the North Sea. Proud of their work, hard work, against the odds and elements that built a legacy for this nation, part of the Scottish story. So I've said before, and I'll say again, that work will continue for decades to come. But they also told me about the legacy they can build for Scotland's future, the pride they have in a new opportunity, converting this infrastructure into a thriving carbon capture and storage industry, literally putting the carbon back in the ground it came from, and giving their community a future not just for the short term, but for decades. Conference, this is what our investment can do. This is a race Scotland can win. And that's not national renewal. That isn't. then I don't know what is. And it captures perfectly the arguments we must put forward to the Scottish people at the next election. Who do you trust to make the big calls in Scotland's interests? Who do you trust to maximise Scotland's influence? What kind of politics do you want to steer our ship through these storms? And the answer, with a new sense of service and respect in our politics, with a plan for Britain that can get our future back, with a cause that will always serve the interests of working people, is national renewal with Labour. The conference, we know that Scotland will judge us, will judge Britain by our actions, not by our words. So for our argument to convince again, it needs to feel true in the communities that once voted for us, but have found a new political home with the SNP. And that will be hard, because for the past 14 years, the SNP have had a faithful ally in the Conservative Party in Westminster that willfully makes it impossible to argue that Britain is on their side. I mean, how can you contest that? At every stage of this vicious cycle of crisis and stagnation, the Tories have protected people like them while working people have paid the price. At every opportunity, they've stoked the fires of division because they think it works for their political objectives. Party first, country second. So we know this leaves us with a mountain to climb. We know that we will have to fight for every vote. The right to say, we are the change Scotland needs. That must be earned, door to door, conversation to conversation, community by community, with our ears every bit as open as our mouths. But if people want to know what I would say to those voters who have left us, I would say this. First, that Scotland's influence in Britain will be strongest if you have a Scottish Labour Party working with a Labour government. And that includes a new generation of brilliant Scottish Labour MPs in power in Westminster. But also that no matter what the SNP say, the Tories can win the next election. Of course they can. Politics is volatile. It's ridiculous to say otherwise. So I would also say this. Imagine, even if only for a second, what it will feel like if you wake up on the day after the election and the Tories are back, encouraged again, emboldened again, entitled again. Because respectfully, I do not think that would be in Scotland's national interest. And the easiest way to stop it, the only way to be sure of stopping it, is to choose Labour to fight for Scotland in Westminster. Furthermore, I would also say this, that while I know there will always be a debate about Scotland's constitutional future, if right now you want a Britain that places Scotland at the heart of the Westminster debate, if you want a politics that is committed to smashing the class ceiling, if you want to see more money for Scottish public services or Scottish community energy projects, then that's change we can deliver for Scotland. If you believe in industrial strategy, if you believe growth comes from all of us, not just those at the top, that every community deserves secure jobs and higher wages, that we should bulldoze through red tape to deliver affordable homes, and that working people deserve a new deal at work which understands the best way to get things done in a modern workplace is to treat people fairly and respectfully, with no more zero-hour contracts, no more fire and rehire, and a real living wage for all, then that is the change we can deliver for Scotland. If you want a credible plan to tackle the climate crisis that understands clean energy is a golden opportunity, that new jobs can be created here in Scotland, and that the SNP has failed Scottish workers on this because they don't have the desire to do the job, when you could have a national wealth fund to invest in Scottish steel and sports, a British jobs bonus to create 50,000 new jobs in Scotland's industrial heartlands, a publicly owned company, Great British Energy, based in Scotland, investing in Scotland's energy, removing our dependence on tyrants like Putin and delivering cheaper bills for Scottish homes, then that is the change that we can deliver for Scotland. And finally, I would also say this, because if you do want that change for Scotland, if you do want this to be more than words, if we are to show you that Labour Britain and what it can do for your community, then we do need the chance to serve. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, that chance, that change, that difference we could make is on the ballot at the general election. And the power of the vote, the power to build a new Scotland, rests in your hands. Because all around Scotland, you can see glimpses of a new future. You can see it in the hydrogen and carbon capture clusters at Grangemouth, the marvel of the Whiteley wind farm outside this city, the innovative brilliance of the video gamers in Dundee, the strength and resilience of Scottish rural communities, the restless creative spirits of its cities, the unchanging beauty of the Highlands, the allure of these islands, and most of all, from the yards of Fife to the rigs of Aberdeen and the hospitals that even now in terrible circumstances still do their best for this nation, you can see the determination and pride of working people, an ambition, their ambition, that we can match in Westminster, empower in Holyrood, and with it, build a new Scotland, a future Scotland, a Scotland once again the beating heart of Britain, because Britain once again serves its working people. Conference, that is what I would say. That is the Scotland we can build together, the future we can get back, the change we can deliver, the argument we take to the streets, communities, the islands of this nation. Labour will end decline and division. Labour will deliver national renewal for Scotland. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Nice to see you.
Simon be ready? Will Simon be ready? Yes. That was our next Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen. I'm convinced of it. Next, we've given Simon McFarlane the unenviable task to follow that speech. Simon, I think. I understand he's around here somewhere.